Bismillah, alhamdulillah, assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you. What a beautiful greeting. This is a greeting that Jesus greeted his followers with. Moses, Abraham, all the messengers of God, and the last and final messenger, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. They greeted their followers with this greeting of peace, and we are greeting you here today with that same greeting of peace. Now, I'm very excited. We're bringing out to continue the story of one man's road to Islam, who graduated with honors from the Harvard University. He was an ordained minister, a deacon, who started preaching the Bible at a very young age, and he was filling the churches, people excited to hear him speak, going to seminary school. He's a Muslim now. What happened? Did he take a wrong turn, or he took the right turn? Tell us now. Well, actually, he's going to tell us how he accepted Islam. When we come back here in the Deen Show, you don't want to go nowhere.
Allah, there's only one God, and Muhammad is his messenger. Allah, la ilaha illallah. Allah, there's only one God, and Jesus was his messenger. Allah, la ilaha illallah.
I don't know why I did that. Maybe it's just to break the ice. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
For those people now, I wish you peace, you wished it back upon me. And I told them that's the greeting of all the prophets.
Yes.
And we also mentioned something about the beard last week. You want to just fill in the blank?
Well, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, instructed us to have beards, and also in places instructed us to just let them grow. And so I've let my beard grow.
And we addressed this last week. If you didn't see last week's show, that was part one to why Dr. Jerald Dirks accepted Islam. And I had mentioned that some people can't get past. One time my guest was wearing a, what do you call it? A
kufi?
Not a kufi, something else on the top of the head. And I had to have him address it. And once he addressed it, people, you know, they just start to understand a little better, and then they can appreciate it. And what we said in the first show is that Jesus, most likely he had a beard. And any picture you see, supposedly they try to paint Jesus, you'll never see him without a beard. Hardly or all the ever. Prophets. This is a pious way of trying to emulate not the movie stars, but the best of humanity, the prophets of the creator of the heavens and earth.
Yes.
All right. So now we talked about, and you can see this in part one, how you went from at a young age teaching, preaching the Bible, finishing and getting a divinity degree, and going to seminary school, and then from there, sum it up along with what I just said, and then we'll go on to the rest of the story, how you actually came to Islam.
Well, as we mentioned last week, in 1974, I graduated from Harvard Divinity School with a Master of Divinity. I was an ordained minister in the United Methodist Church. But at that point, I spent 3 months in that summer filling pulpits in 2 rural parishes in Kansas. And then in September of 1974, I left the parish ministry for good. I was still an ordained minister. I still believe very definitely in God. But coming out of my seminary education, as we talked about last week, I had no belief in the divinity of Jesus or in the concept of the Trinity, etc. So I started a path that I call my path of being an atypical Christian. Believed very much in God, prayed, read the Bible, studied new archaeological finds as they came out on the Bible and other Christian texts. But again, no belief in the divinity of Jesus, peace be upon him, no belief in a Trinity. And I basically continued in this line as an atypical Christian from 1974 until 1993. But the turning point actually started a couple years before I became a Muslim. It was 1991, and my wife and I, for several years, had been doing research on the history of the Arabian horse. And we had some Arabic documents.
What's the Arabian horse?
The Arabian horse? Well, well, it's a horse.
For people who,
the Arabian horse is a horse that was bred for centuries by the Bedouins of the Middle East.
Okay.
They typically have one less vertebrae in their back and one less vertebrae in their tail than other horses, and they are the preeminent endurance horse.
Yes.
So we'd been studying the history of the Arabian horse for a number of years and been writing about it. And we had some Arabic documents,
Yeah.
hujjas, that had accompanied a shipment of horses in 1906 to the United States. These were the Arabic testimonials of purity and about the origin of these horses that came over in that year. We wanted to get them translated. And they hadn't been translated up to this point in time.
Yes.
And this brought us into contact with a portion of the Arab community in Denver, Colorado, that happened to be Muslim. And our first such contact occurred in the summer of 1991, and it was with Brother Jamal. And he came out to our farm, looked at our horses, glanced at the Arabic documents, and said, sure, he'd be happy to translate them for us. And we began that process, a little bit here, a little bit there. But along the way, a very close friendship developed.
Yes.
And before long, we were getting together on a weekly to bi-weekly basis, just socially.
You weren't a little nervous,
friends.
skeptical, thinking like, had some preconceived ideas or notions that, what you might have seen on TV that, I got to be careful, this guy might be some kind of terrorist or some kind of...
Well, again, we're talking 1991, so it's a little before...
A little before all the drama.
Yeah, okay. But no, I didn't have any such feelings whatsoever. Along the way, and it's important, I think, to point this out, Jamal never proselytized. He never said, this is the way to believe.
Yes.
He never said, you ought to become a Muslim. However, that first time he came out to the farm, before he left, he asked if he might use our restroom to make ablution before praying. And he came out of the restroom and then said, may I borrow a piece of newspaper to put on the floor so that I can pray?
So this is the ritual washing before
yes.
one...
And then we gave him the newspaper, and he laid it out on the floor, and he did his prescribed prayer. Now, again, he never said anything to us about, hey, are you Muslims, or why aren't you Muslims, or you should be doing this. His dawah, or his preaching, was in his behavior.
His actions, huh?
Yeah. His example. He prayed.
Yeah.
A very powerful form of preaching, actually.
Yeah. Describe this prayer for us, please, for those who have never seen it.
It was the standard Islamic prayer. It had the different postures. You begin standing, and then there are some things that you say. This was during the day, so he was saying them to himself.
Yeah.
And then you bow, and then after bowing you stand again, and then you prostrate, and then you kneel, and then you prostrate, and you go through this cycle, which is called a rakat.
Did you think he was praying maybe to a moon god, or did you think...
No, of course not.
No. Who did you think he was praying to?
To God.
To God?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. His understanding of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, social contact continued. We were getting together once every week to every 2 weeks. And as he continued to translate stuff for us occasionally, he would begin to share with us knowledge about the history of the Arabian horse in the Middle East.
Yes.
And along the way of doing that, he began to quote different verses from the Quran or different sayings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, different aspects of Islam, not to proselytize, but to give us a way of understanding the Islamic context of the history of the Arabian horse.
Yes.
So again, it was all presented not as proselytizing, but as you're interested in the history of the Arabian horse, I will seek to meet your needs. But in doing that, I'm going to have to explain this context to you so you really understand it.
Yes.
So this continued on, and over the next 16 months, our contact expanded, not just with Jamal, but also with Wael and his family, with Amr and his family, Ahmed and his family, etc.
These were just other Muslims.
The other Muslims. We were getting together socially. Again, no active or direct proselytizing going on. But in the process of observing these Muslim brothers, I became increasingly impressed with their behavior. I mean, they were living a very moral and ethical life, bending over backwards to do it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
I remember Jamal, who ran at that time sort of a mom and pop grocery store in Denver.
Yeah.
And I was at the store once when the state weights inspector came by to examine the scales.
Yes.
And he examined them and told Jamal, you know, they're within tolerance. And Jamal said, well, look, this is what I want you to do. I want you to turn them against me to the limits of what's tolerance in the state.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure I'm not shortchanging my customers.
Wow.
So I mean, this is the sort of behavior I was observing. And it wasn't just ethics in terms of their business life, it was the ethics in terms of their family life, the way they interacted with their wives, with their children, etc. Very powerful behavioral example. And I observed this for about 16 months. And finally, it must have been in December of 1992, I got around to asking myself the sort of the fundamental question, which is, what separates these Muslim friends of mine from me in terms of belief? Well, where's the difference? Now, I had studied Islam sort of superficially
Yes.
or briefly back at Harvard in comparative religions courses. And but this question was eating at me. I mean, here are these people living these very moral and upright lives. My wife and I have been trying to do that as well, but we felt that we were sort of doing that within the context of a moral vacuum.
Yeah.
What separates me from them in terms of actual religious beliefs? Well, I suppose I could have asked them.
Yeah.
I didn't want to.
Okay.
I didn't want to impinge on our friendship.
Yeah.
And so I went downstairs, began dusting off all the books on Islam I had acquired back in those comparative religions courses.
Yes.
And they were all written by non-Muslim Western scholars. And there's probably a half a dozen or more of them. And I took them down, I reread them. I took down 2 different translations of the meaning of the Quran that I had acquired back in those courses, read them. And the more I read, the more I said, no, wait a minute. You know, this is what I believe.
Starting to connect.
Yeah, very much starting to connect. And the other thing that eventually happened in that process was, as I continued to read in the English translations of the meaning of the Quran, especially where it was talking about biblical history
Yes.
and biblical concepts, I saw within the Quran statements about these things that I knew could not have been known by any illiterate 7th century Arab. And of course, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was illiterate.
He didn't know how to read, write. The history confirms this.
Yes, yes.
And he was known as the truthful. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes. And so now I'm left with a question.
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
So you're looking at this and you're like, this
He
can't
couldn't
come
have known it.
from this man or
He
any
couldn't have
man.
known it. No, he couldn't have known it.
Uh-huh.
And so that left me with the conclusion, you know, this had to be inspired.
Yeah.
However you want to define inspired,
Yeah.
in some sense this knowledge was inspired by God.
Wow. Subhanallah.
And quite honestly, brother, I was uncomfortable with that conclusion.
Why?
I didn't like that conclusion
Uh-huh.
because that raised questions about my own sense of religious identity.
Yeah.
You know, I still continued to call myself a Christian, even though I was an atypical Christian. And I didn't like that challenge to my sense of identity. So this is where things started, about in December of 1992. And in late December of 1992, my wife and I were talking about this all the way through. We were filling out our passport application forms for a proposed trip to the Middle East to do some research on the history of the Arabian Horse. And one of the questions on the passport form was religious affiliation. Well, I didn't even think about it. You know, I just wrote in Christian and went on.
Yeah.
And a few seconds later, my wife turned to me and said, how did you fill out the question on religious affiliation? And I said, well, Christian, of course. And I laughed, just as you're laughing right now. And then went on to say, you know, I'm a Christian, not a Muslim. Now,
Is it at the same time, is she doing her own research with you, along with you?
Yeah, we're talking about it all the way
All the
through.
time, okay.
Yeah. Okay, now the thing is, in terms of this story,
Uh-huh.
you know, I was trained, have a doctorate in clinical psychology.
Yeah.
You know, I was a practicing psychotherapist. I knew that laughter is often a release of psychological tension.
Uh-huh.
And I had laughed at this question.
Yeah.
Oh, what was the psychological tension that needed to be released
Yeah.
when my wife asked me this innocuous question? Furthermore, why did I need to immediately follow it up by saying, I'm a Christian, not a Muslim? You know, a person does not defend against an accusation that has not been made. Now, my wife hadn't said, did you write down Muslim? In fact, her response when I said, I'm a Christian, not a Muslim, her immediate response was, well, no, I was inquiring whether you wrote down Christian or Protestant or Methodist. So the accusation had come from my own unconscious mind.
Uh-huh.
You know, there was a part of my own unconscious mind that was saying, you're a Muslim.
Yeah.
And my conscious mind was saying, oh, no, I'm not.
It's a battle within now.
Yeah, it's a battle within. And this battle continued. You know, by January of 1993, I was now reading my third different English translation of the meaning of the Quran. You know, because again, I wasn't going to trust these first two. You know, I didn't like that conclusion I had come to, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, had been inspired by God.
Yeah.
Because this raised issues in terms of my own identity.
Yes.
Well, I continued studying though, and in January of 1993, I began experimenting with saying the 5 daily prayers of Islam alone in private, and of course in English, because I didn't know the Arabic to do them that way. And I found this very spiritually rewarding, very spiritually gratifying. But again, I'm an atypical Christian. I may be an atypical Christian who doesn't believe in the divinity of Jesus, who doesn't believe in the Trinity, who's reading the Quran every day in English translation, and who's saying the 5 prayers of Islam every day in English, but I'm still an atypical Christian.
Yeah.
Well, late in January of 1993, it was my lunch hour at my private practice, so I went to an Arab restaurant I had started to frequent. And I took with me my third translation of the Quran, thought I'd get some reading done over lunch.
Yeah.
And so I walked in, I sat down, and I started reading. And all of a sudden, Mahmoud, the owner of the restaurant, who was from Damascus and a Muslim, came up to my table to take my order. He glanced down at what I was reading, but he didn't say anything. Took my order and left, and so I continued reading. Well, when my order was ready, instead of Mahmoud bringing it back to me, he sent his wife to bring it to me, who was an American and a convert to Islam.
Oh, she had accepted Islam.
Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah.
and wore the hijab, the scarf that I'd come to associate with Muslim females. And so Sister Iman came, and she brought me my order, and she glanced down and said, oh, I see you're reading the Quran. Are you a Muslim? And the word was out of my mouth before it could be modified by any social etiquette whatsoever. I said, no! and about that way, brother. And she said, oh, that's okay. And she turned around and left. And I said to myself, my goodness, what is going on with me? You know, I've answered an innocuous question rudely and aggressively. This isn't like me. And I started stewing over it then as I ate my lunch. You know, I'm going to have to make some amends to Sister Maman when she comes back to bring me the check for the meal. And so I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it. And when the meal was over, she brought me the check, and I said something to the extent of, you know, I think I answered your question a little abruptly when you asked me whether I was a Muslim. If you were asking me whether I believe there is only one God, my answer is yes. And if you were asking me whether I believe that Muhammad, peace be upon him, though I didn't say that at that point, was one of the prophets of God, my answer is yes.
So this is from researching now, looking into his life and reading the Quran, that you're coming to this conclusion now.
Yes.
But you just didn't want to, the identity now was the problem.
Yeah, identity is an issue.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point that in my own English words, I had just said the Shahada, or the Islamic testimonial of faith. And Sister Iman very nicely smiled and said, that's okay, it takes some people a little longer than others, and left me to stew on it a little more. Now again, I knew I had just said the Shahada, but I was still an atypical Christian, mind you. Now I'm an atypical Christian who's reading the Quran in English translation, saying the 5 daily prayers of Islam in English in private, is willing to say the Shahada in my own carefully parsed English words, but I'm still an atypical Christian. I'm not a Muslim.
Yeah.
If somebody else, some Muslim, wants to take what I've said and say, you're a Muslim, that's their label of religious identity.
Just real
it's
quick,
not mine.
Define what a Muslim is really quickly, and then continue on, please.
Well, a Muslim is one, by definition, linguistically, one who submits, and that's one who submits to God. But typically, one says a person becomes a Muslim when they say the Shahada or the testimonial of faith.
And that just made easy, summed up with one word in Arabic, right? That's simple, okay.
So, I'm still an atypical Christian.
Yeah.
And I think I'm starting to sort my way out of this challenge to my sense of religious identity. If someone asks me whether I'm a Muslim, I'll go through a long 5-minute song and dance in which I'll say, I don't believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ. I don't believe in the Trinity. I do believe there is one and only one God. I do believe that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was one of the prophets of God. And yes, I'm saying the 5 prayers every day in English at their appointed times. And yes, I'm reading English translation of the meaning of the Quran every day. But I'm an atypical Christian. And so that's sort of where things were for a while.
How do you get past this now?
Well, around the start of March of that year, Ramadan started.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is the month in which Muslims fast from dawn to sunset. Well, I have all these Muslim friends, and I spend so much time with these Muslim friends, and it would be very rude of me to eat or drink in front of them while they're fasting, so I won't do that. But if I'm going to spend that much time fasting anyway, well, why don't I just go ahead and fast from dawn to sunset like they're doing?
Yeah.
And I sort of rationalized and half convinced myself I was just doing this out of common courtesy for my friends. But again, I found it very meaningful as I began to do it. So now I'm an atypical Christian who is willing to say the Shahada in English, reading the Quran in English, saying the 5 prayers in English, fasting during Ramadan, but I'm still an atypical Christian.
You're kind of driving the Porsche, but you're not calling it a Porsche.
That's about where we're at. And again, I thought I had it all worked out.
Yeah.
Other people could call me a Muslim if they wanted to, but that wasn't my
You weren't ready.
label of religious identity. I was an atypical Christian. And I thought I had it all worked out. I thought I had it planned out perfectly. I could believe as my Muslim friends believed. I could practice as my Muslim friends practiced. But I could keep my sense of religious identity of being a Christian. Well, that lasted for quite a while. But it was late in March of 1993, and my wife and I were now in Jordan doing that Middle Eastern trip. And we were staying with the extended family of one of our friends in Denver. And one day, Uncle Awad motioned for me to come with him.
Uncle who?
Awad.
Awad.
That was his name, Awad. And he spoke not a word of English.
Yeah.
Elderly Palestinian Muslim brother. So I got in the car with him, and we drove off, and he took me to a Palestinian refugee camp. And we got out, and we started walking down the narrow lane of the camp. And as we were walking down that lane, another elderly person came walking towards us, who also, it turns out, spoke not one word of English. And we met there, and we exchanged Assalamu alaikum, or peace be upon you, and shook hands. And then he turned to me and he asked me a question in Arabic.
In Arabic now.
In Arabic, because he spoke no English.
Yeah.
Now, my Arabic was limited to a few simple words and phrases.
Yes.
And that was about it. I certainly couldn't hold even an elementary conversation in Arabic. But I knew just enough Arabic that I fully understood his question.
Yes.
And his question was, are you a Muslim?
Oh.
And, my 5-minute verbal gymnastics.
Out the window now.
Out the window.
You're stumped.
Utterly useless. I knew just enough Arabic that I could answer Naam for yes or La for no, and those were the only 2 choices I had.
You got set up.
I was set up by someone far, far
The creator of the heavens and the
yes,
earth.
far better planner than I.
Yes.
And alhamdulillah, or praise be to God, at that point in time, I said naam, or yes. But it took all of that before I was willing to give up that sense of religious identity that I had. And I think this is something that people who are involved in sharing the message of Islam often fail to appreciate. Sometimes it's much easier to get a person to change their religious beliefs than it is to get them to change their sense of identity, of who they are. That can be very difficult.
Yeah. And you finally, with the help of the creator of the heavens and the earth, in Arabic we say Allah, that it finally happened, and now you're writing books on Islam and helping people understand this beautiful way of life, trying to help clear the misconceptions. Could we briefly, they're signaling that we're almost out of time. Tell us now, you mentioned that before you accepted that, okay, I'm a Muslim, I'm one who's chosen consciously to submit to the one God. You said one God. What do you believe now? What do you mean when you say I believe in the one God, but you don't believe in these other things, that the divinity of Jesus, sonship, crucifixion, but you said you believe in one God? What does that mean? Can you elaborate a little bit about this? What do you actually mean when you mean?
Well, I believe in one God. There is one and only one God. And that one God
Because some Christians will say we also believe in just one God.
Well, and in point of fact, to be fair, they do. I mean, if you properly understand the notion of the Trinity, it is monotheistic.
Yeah.
However, from a Muslim perspective, they are adding partners.
Partners.
And so they have their Trinitarian formula, 3 persons in one substance.
Yeah.
And for us as Muslims, it's the unity of God.
Yeah.
There's no 3 persons in one substance. There is only God.
So it's just purely, absolutely one God. No
Yes.
co-equal, no partner, no one alongside with God.
Yeah, no 3 persons in one substance.
No sons or daughters or any kind of family, bloodline, DNA.
No.
None of this with God.
No.
Okay, no human qualities associated with God.
Oh, God is far above that.
Far above any of these human deficiencies. Okay, talk about the 5 pillars now that you practice. So someone can get a sense of, is this something eccentric? Is something way far-fetched that, goes against my nature? Is it something that if you can understand this, then you know what? This is like the engine. This is what, makes it run.
There are basically 5 pillars of practice.
Yeah.
The first one is saying the testimonial of faith. Ashhadu la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an Muhammadur Rasulullah. Which basically means I testify that there is no God but God, and I testify that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was one of the messengers of God.
Now, does this exclude like Jesus, Moses, and all of them?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, the Quran tells us we have to accept those prophets as well.
So is your relationship now with Jesus, do you feel like stronger? Do you feel like you've lost the connection with him?
No, I don't feel like there's any loss of connection at all.
No?
No, of course not.
What do you believe about Jesus now?
Basically what I believed about him during my years as an atypical Christian, which was that he was inspired by God, he received a revelation from God, but he was not God.
Yeah. So he was like the other messengers?
Sure.
Doing what?
Sharing the revelation that God gave to him.
That's it. A teacher teaching us.
Yes.
So is it safe to say that he was, during his time, the way, the truth, and the life? Just like
absolutely.
Abraham,
Absolutely.
Moses?
In terms of the message he preached. In fact, the word prophet comes from the Greek, and it's a translation of the Hebrew word nevi'im, which in turn comes from the Akkadian language. And if you go back to that Akkadian language and look at what it means one who speaks for.
Yeah.
And in a religious context,
one who speaks for.
Yeah, it means one who speaks for God. This is what a prophet is.
Yeah.
One who speaks for God. By definition.
That just makes sense. Okay, so the belief in one God, that there's no God, no deity except the one God.
Yes.
And Muhammad is his last messenger,
Yes.
and that confirmed all the other messengers that preceded him.
And then very quickly, the other 4 pillars, saying the 5 prayers of Islam every day. 3rd pillar, fasting during Ramadan. 4th pillar, paying zakat or obligatory charity on one's economic surplus. And 5th pillar, making the Hajj once in your adult lifetime. Now, the last 3 of those are conditional based upon your physical and financial well-being.
Has this changed your life now by implementing this? Is this like a complete blueprint on how you need to function from A to Z throughout the day?
In many respects, yes, and in some respects, no.
Tell me.
In terms of no, many of the things I was already basically practicing.
Yeah.
Before I became a Muslim,
Did you eat pork?
I did eat pork. That was one thing I had to give up.
Did you like a little Jack Daniels, or did you like some,
Yeah,
back then?
I drank.
'Cause you can't drink now, obviously.
Yeah, I drank maybe once a year.
Uh-huh.
One drink a year.
Yeah.
So giving up alcohol, that was basically giving
was
it
easy,
up.
yeah.
Giving up pork, that took some getting used to.
Uh-huh.
But those are changes. But in terms of living this sort of ethical life, etc., that's not a change. And in terms of much of what I believed, it's not a change.
Now we talked about that main pillar, that one, he acknowledges that there's no God besides the one God, and this is something that just goes with your nature, that you worship God alone, you don't set up a co-equal, co-partner, you don't pray to Jesus, but you pray to the one Jesus prayed to.
Yes.
And now the prayer, did you feel like now that since you're implementing, because that's the second pillar of Islam, this prayer, was this having a positive influence on your life? Because who can reject, prayer? This is, when you ask someone, is prayer good? He's like, yeah, so you pray now 5 times a day.
Yeah, well, the prayer of worship 5 times a day.
Yeah.
There's personal prayer.
Anytime, right?
Anytime, any place, anywhere.
Yeah.
Basically. But yeah, in terms of the prayers of worship, the 5 prayers of worship every day, as I mentioned before, even before I was willing to call myself a Muslim, and I was saying them in English, in private, I found them very rewarding.
Yeah.
I found them spiritually rewarding.
Yeah.
And I think the big difference, brother, would be this. In terms of my belief structure, not that much changed.
Yeah.
From going from being an atypical Christian to being a Muslim. So my intellectual approach to religion didn't change that much.
Yeah.
But the spiritual approach, that's where the change was.
I see.
Because I found this spiritual gratification, this feeling that is very hard to describe, but is a very, very meaningful thing, very comforting thing, a very enriching thing. And by following the 5 pillars, I found this spiritual gratification, this sense of spiritual reward that I was not finding as an atypical Christian.
Okay, just reverse for a second, and then we're going to come forward and finish things up, and then we want to talk a little bit about your book. But tell us, was it, as far as, can someone say, or did you feel that it was a kind of, back then, it was an esoteric, thing where only now you had to, someone can say you weren't maybe feeling the Holy Ghost, you had to be full of this to really understand it, and you didn't have it?
I don't know that I want to use the word Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
But, the spiritual side,
Yeah.
there's where the change was. Not so much the intellectual understanding, not so much the morality and the ethics, but in terms of the spiritual gratification and enrichment, the sense, maybe this is a better way of putting it, the sense of being close to God.
Yeah. And is this something that everyone, as I said, do you have to get something that just overtakes you and you're just on cloud 9? Or is it something that you use just your good old common sense and your intellect and your sincerity and asking God to guide you, that someone can come to that feeling?
Well, I think different people come to it in different ways. And if you were to interview 20 different converts to Islam, you probably would get 20 different variations.
Okay.
And so I think for each convert, they have in some ways their own unique path whereby they reach God and reach the truth of God's religion, Islam.
Okay, so you had the 5 pillars. Tell us now that you have some books that we had discussed. You have the Easy Understanding of Islam. You have the Abrahamic Faith.
Yes.
You have Muslim History in America. You have Letters to My Elders. You have a lot of books here, brother. We have Understanding Islam, The Cross and the Crescent. Where can someone, if they're intrigued by your story, they want to learn more, where can they go to visit and to pick up some of your books?
Well, I have a website.
Yes.
It's dirksonlinebooks.com, and they can go there and order any of the books that they want. as well as contact me by email if they choose to.
Okay, and that's right there, dirksonlinebooks.com. Your email's there. If somebody wants to invite you maybe to come speak, do a public lecture, you're available for those?
Yes, yes, and again, they can contact me with the email that's available on my website.
We got to come to and give, please, some sincere advice. You've been through a lot in life. You have now come to this realization, this is the truth. Not everybody has to agree with this.
That's right.
But for that person who is sincere, he is having the same issues with the identity. He doesn't want to leave possibly the identity of being a Christian or Buddhist or this or that. He has his inner circle, his status. He fears maybe a loss. People are going to look at him funny. What advice do you have for this person?
Well, the advice I would give if you're wrestling with this issue of religious identity is don't compound the conflict. Becoming a Muslim does not mean that you give up your national or your cultural identity. I'm an American. I was born in America. I was raised in America. My national cultural identity hasn't changed at all. I'm still an American. And to become a Muslim, you don't need to give up your national identity or your cultural identity. The only identity under consideration is your religious identity. And so if you've studied the Bible, and the Bible is one of the paths to Islam, I would maintain. If you've studied the Bible, if you've done your research through the commentaries, if you've come to the conclusion that there is one and only one God, and that God is unity, not Trinity, if you've come to the conclusion that Jesus was inspired by God, and God gave revelation to Jesus, but he was still a human being, then please take a look at Islam, because we're really talking the same language here. And again, you don't have to give up your national cultural identity to be a Muslim.
Thank you. This is some great advice, and thank you very much for being with us. God willing, we're going to have a special section because we're going to look forward to, God willing, doing some more topics with you, picking your brain so we can learn some more from this in-depth knowledge you have of the Bible and some of your experiences, so more of us, including myself, can benefit. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And I'd like to thank you for being with us again on the Dean Show. I hope you got the benefit from Dr. Dirks' story and his way to Islam. And I hope that you continue to come back, visit us here at the Dean Show. And we hope that, inshallah, God willing, that God Almighty guides us all to the one truth, that he guides our hearts, our minds, our bodies to accept that he is the only one to be worshipped. He is the only one that we should turn to, that we should revere, that we should love, the one God, the God who Jesus prayed to, who Moses prayed to, who Abraham, in the last and final messenger sent to mankind, the Prophet Muhammad, who he prayed to. These were the best teachers, people who we should emulate, because they were showing us how to praise God, to worship God, and be close to God and get to paradise. Because life is short. This life is very short. It's transitory. It's passing quickly. And they all taught that there's a better life. There's a paradise waiting. And that's what we're trying to get to. And we need God, and we need God's help to get to that paradise. We'll see you next time. Thank you once again. Until then, assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار.
Come and see what everyone's talking about.
أشهد
أشهد
أن لا
أن لا
إله
إله
But the argument here is that God, out of his love,
Because in all honesty, if you really wanted to do something, you're going to find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way.
absolutely.
There are a few problems here. Why were people of generations and generations and generations being told to worship one God, ask that God for forgiveness, ask him for salvation, seek his mercy, no one else's?
So he picked up the Quran, which is the last and final testament, the last and final revelation.
Yeah, I was 16 years, 8 years inactive reserves and 8 years active duty. But the bottom line is that I'm an ophthalmologist. I'm a specialist in cataract and refractive surgery. I'm the medical director of a major eye center.
We have a question from a Christian who says, I was born a Christian, I was raised a Christian.
Wants to take a look. It challenges the reader. Prove. If you find one contradiction, it can't be from God.
But the rational idea, the rational explanation is, you do your best to obey your Lord. You will fall short. Nobody's perfect. All of us make mistakes. You do your best and then expect from God's mercy.
What's the purpose of my life? Why am I here? Is it just to play, have fun, go to the nightclubs, kick it on the weekends, earn some money, have a good time, and then I die?
She's really not looking to get into a relationship just to kind of, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and walk away from it the way that men are.
Why do I have to convert to Islam? If God made me a Christian, if God made my family a Christian, then why should I change that way? Because God is the one who created me in that way.
And most atheists, when they pray this way. They say, oh God, if you are there, because they're not quite sure.
A line of messengers who start with Adam, Abraham, Moses, David, Suleiman, and Jesus, and we say peace and blessings be upon all of them.
I made a promise to my Creator on that day. I promised that if He would save the life of my child,
and alone running this universe, that he doesn't become born, he doesn't die, he doesn't eat and go to the bathroom. He's not a man that has an area code, a zip code. Now you can fingerprint him, take his picture, and the girl say, oh, he's cute.
a lot of you out there know exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of you out there are in the exact same position.
He said, I will never give up worshiping God as one. I will never give up spreading this message.
I hope that you take that necessary step. You don't know if you're going to live till tomorrow. So you got to find that urgency to do the right thing right now.
Just clarified everything for me. That's when I became Muslim.
The majority of people you talk to, yeah, they know they got to change. They know they got to do good, but they don't do the good. Why is this, Sheikh?
The ranking of the 100 most influential men in the history of the world.
Laziness, the reality of life usually doesn't sink in until tragedy comes. You know, this is when you find people, okay, tell me about it. You know?
You get a few bad people, the media grabs a hold of that and spins it the way they want to.
And in it, he puts Muhammad as number one. He said no human being had more influence.
One of the amazing things about Islam that everyone should know is that we are the only other religion that is a tenet of faith that you must believe in Jesus Christ and everything that he did, or you cannot be a Muslim. If that is missing, if you say that you do not believe in Jesus, you have stepped outside of Islam. You cannot be a Muslim. It is a tenet of our faith to believe in and love Jesus Christ.
These are not God. God is the one who created everything in this universe. That's the one I'm going to worship and prostrate to. How can you go wrong doing that? You don't believe in him, you're out of Islam.
You cannot be a Muslim.
Top 10 reasons why Jesus cannot be God. Let's get right to it.
Cannot be God.
Number 10.
Number 10.
Rasulullah.
Rasulullah.
Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu والحمد لله ولا إله
You'll be glad you did.
الله أكبر سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله